Good evening, everyone. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Just quickly give an introduction about myself. My name is Dr. Praveen Barala, and I'm a Director of Clinical Operations at Janssen. I'm an MD Internal Medicine by training, and then practiced medicine for 2 years, and then decided to go back to corporate side. Right now, I manage early development oncology, especially heme and solid-state tumors, and also late-phase trials in orphan drugs program. Work with pharma, CROs, biotech, and I'm also appointed as a United States Clinical Researcher of the Year award from 2012 all the way to 2017, 5 years in a row. I've been appointed again this year. Hopefully, I'll make it through April. In 2017, I was a top 2 silver medalist in Pharma Times United States Clinical Researcher of the Year award. At Solars, I'm a subject matter expert for their clinical trial management program, and I'm also a consultant for the hands-on internship program here. Today, I just want to give my thoughts about clinical data science and how this program is beneficial for people with different backgrounds, and as a business owner, how I utilize the data management services for my portfolio across the compounds. As you know, this one is such a certificate program in clinical data science. People used to think like, data management, they use the word very vaguely. Clinical data management is like a humongous thing. That in every corporate, as you see, there's a separate department inside where different folks from different components of data management work in collaboration to make things happen at clinical trials. But now that data management has evolved into a science. Because if you see, every time you see people are talking about big data, people are talking about artificial intelligence, people are talking about data analytical tools, people are talking about machine learning technology, right? So why we need that? Why we have to know about all these components of data science? Because always remember, at least I can speak for clinical trials, whenever we talk about clinical trials, we need to talk about 3 important things: subject safety, data integrity, and the reputation of organization. And these 3 are interrelated. Why we work every day in a pharma or a CRO to bring credible drugs into the market. But provided we also make sure the right safety and well-being of the patients are protected, right? So safety is the prime concern for clinical trials. But how are you going to prove your hypothesis? You can't directly go and say like, hey, my drug is safe, right? You need to substantiate it with the credible data. So for each and every component of clinical trial, we need data to support your hypothesis, to support your primary endpoints, secondary endpoints. That's where statistics, computational tools comes into picture. And then by supporting not only just the data, it's a credible data. So it also come from a credible source. So that's where data integrity is very important. And these 2 are directly related to the reputation of the organization. A lot of companies got busted because of making up the data or following illegal and unethical procedures to just make those numbers up or jeopardize the data integrity. So for that reason, nowadays the pharma, either it's an outsourced trial or inpatient trial, a lot of effort, money, resources are put into the data science. Especially they are looking for the people who have experience in statistics and also different languages like SAS or SQL and machine learning technologies and artificial intelligence, and then data analytical tools like Spotfire and Tableau. Because we use this a lot. Momentarily, I will explain like how that's going to benefit clinical trial industry, right? So I see a lot of students who joined today. comes from different backgrounds, but overall I can see like everyone has some kind of experience in engineering, science, computational science, and then in different therapeutic areas like immunology and bioinformatics, and some are working even for a CRO. Some have experience in quality and business management. So we have a very and computer science. So we have a very diversified crowd here. But as I said, clinical trials is just like any other business, banking, or because in order for the business to run, people from different cross sectors, cross functionalities with different educations, competencies, and skill set, they work in collaboration to run this business. So that's where clinical data science also comes into picture. Simple example. Every day we talk about artificial intelligence. What is that? Like, it's a smart way of doing business, right? So using the data, existing data, to run the algorithms in the back to see how the data will be presented, how we're going to get a smart business decisions out of that existing data. That's the whole concept of artificial intelligence. Now for clinical trial, I can explain the future of clinical trials is personalized medicine. Now patients are going to the hospitals, or patients are going to the doctors for clinical trials. But the future is trials will come to the patient. Not only the future, even we are going in that route. A lot of online trials also, started, and soon they are even submitting an application for approval of FDA. Now, what is personalized medicine? Like, even if the drug is approved, the drug is maybe different for different patients because of the genetic profile, right? With the HLA component. So how are we going to run those human genomics? Through machine learning technology, right? So if a patient goes to a doctor, the doctor can treat the patient as part of standard of care to see what's the trial, what are the inclusion-exclusion criteria, what are the different diseases they're targeting, and who are the suitable patients who can fit into the profile. And that's how those algorithms run. And then they can present, they can search the existing source documents, especially EMRs. So that's where the data science and the concept of computational tools and statistical analysis tools comes into picture. Why? Because different systems will synchronize with each other, integrated with each other. And now the future is, now there are little pushbacks about integrations with EMR system, but they are still in talks, and some are even adapting those, some of the artificial intelligence firms. They are collaborating with the big pharmaceutical companies for searching the patient's EMR records directly, or in fact EHRs too. So that's the personalized medicine. I'm opening up a clinical trial. I need patients, but what is the best way and smart way to get those patients using the data management tools? First thing is machine learning tools, and then analytical tools. I can directly integrate with the EHR systems to see and serve patients' profiles, patients' prior existing conditions, patients' medical history, HLA components, and then match them with the inclusion and exclusion criteria of the current trial which I'm targeting. And then right there I can have the pre-screening patient population at my tiptoes. That's one of the advantages of data management tools. And what's the other advantage? So getting the patients, and then digitalization of clinical trials. Capturing data is fine, but capturing credible data in a more efficient manner. Now we are using electronic patient-reported outcomes, ePro devices, ClinROs, clinical reported outcomes. So patients can sit at home, we can give them digital theirs, and then they can run those patient diaries at the comfort of their house, and then we can capture the data to the remote server. Visiting nurses can go to the patients, collect the samples. They don't need to even come to the clinic. You see this like how clinical trials became optimized. So optimization of clinical trials depends on data analytical tools. And through that, we do the machine learning, through artificial intelligence, we can have better business decisions. And the most important breakthrough is compliance of the patients. Because 30% of the clinical trials fail because of the lack of patients, about 1/3. You have a credible drug, you have a well-designed protocol, but most of the clinical trials get scrapped because they can't find patients. So patients recruitment can be solved. Patients retention. Retention is like why patients wants to drop out of the trial. Coming every day or keeping up with appointments, keeping with the CAT scans and PET scans and all those physical examinations. Sometimes people have to travel longer distances to make it to the hospitals or clinics. And sometimes they get burned out, super swarmed, and they say, you know what, it's not really working out. I'm already in pain. I don't want to go there twice a week or three times a week to get my blood draws or PKs or biomarkers, you name it. But with technology, patients doesn't need to come to the clinic because we're going to capture the data at the comfort of their house. So we can reduce the number of clinic visits, number of hospital visits. That increases patients' retention. Third important thing is, most of the times we get erratic data because of subject's compliance. If the patient doesn't take the right amount of the drug at the right time, what's going to happen to the data we collected? It's not credible, right? Because you're not giving the right dose to the patient. What you're going to prove from the data, right? Sometimes it becomes invaluable data to the FDA. They say like, I don't know whether we want to use this data or not because this is not coming from a credible source. How are we going to justify if the patient is not taking the optimal dose? And the responses for the dose cannot be extrapolated. So how data science with all these technologies can help patients' compliance? Again, using smart chips, smart technology for packaging, blister packaging, and then use smart technology in chip models. Nowadays we are using the tracking devices in the ingested pills. And the blister, smart technology in the blister packages, what happens? As soon as the patient uses that, it sends a signal saying the patient took the drug. If the patient missed a dose, that will send an automatic triggers to the patient's family and also to the sites or the visiting nurses who are taking care of the patients. That information will be passed to them, and that's when we can oversee and make sure the patients are compliant with the study drug. So right now I told you the most important things like how data management or data science will help clinical trials. Subject recruitment, retention, compliance, and digitalization, and then optimizing the clinical trials. And also most important is like reduce. Already it takes like 5 to 10 years for the drug to come into the market. So this will bring down the total life cycle of the drug so that we can custom tailor some of the, we can reduce the timelines for certain processes using these state-of-the-art technologies. So here at Solars, we target, you know, your the instructors who will be, you know, teaching you the different modules within this program. We'll talk about it shortly, but I just want to give you like, you know, an overall picture from a business perspective, like how this program will benefit you coming from different backgrounds. Because it's not about people with different backgrounds. You are coming into, you know, the data management field where we have, you know, jobs like data delivery leads, data analysts, clinical data managers, global data managers. And then people who have statistical backgrounds, they can even go into stats programming. And then you have SAS programming also. So there's so many positions that's there in data management side. When I say data management, I have a huge organization. As a director, my counterpart at the GDM level, they have almost like 200 to 300 people reporting to him because that's a part of just the data management organization. And they diversify into early development, late phase, and then sometimes they align to therapeutic areas or disease area stronghold. So bottom line is you have very lucrative career opportunities in the data management, and it's easier compared to the other technical or clinical fields. Getting a job into the IT, especially more career opportunities are towards the healthcare sector and clinical data management side. So that's where our program comes with the value proposition. And as I said, why we need, there was a computational medicine, we call it as personalized medicine, precision medicine, pragmatic medicine from a clinician standpoint. What is that? Like optimizing the clinical trials based on the patient's genetic profile. Drug is in the market, but the drug may not act similarly for every patient because of their genetic makeup, metabolism, and PK/PD profile, and also the human dynamics, the whole body dynamics, the way it's all about the pharmacokinetics and dynamics of the drug and also the body, and how it's possible, again, through tools. One of the most important things that I observe as part of clinical operations with this data management, data analytical tools comes into picture is to evaluate the sites. Because, okay, I'm going to show you the process of the clinical trials momentarily, but getting credible patients is also very important, right? But how are you going to get the patients? You're going to get patients through hospitals, big teaching hospitals, university medical centers, specialized research facilities like Memorial Sloan, MD Anderson, Sarah Cannon. But how are we going to search for those sites? Not only sites, credible sites who's going to promise a credible number of patients so that we can give the drug, obtain the data, analyze the data, and report the data to the FDA or health authorities in different countries. Data analytical tools, Tableau, Spotfire, that will be handy for me. Why? Because we go through the historic data to see what are these sites. Did we do trials in these sites before? If so, what are their average startup timelines? What kind of IRBs they are using? What will be the overall timelines for this site to bring completely on board? Then I will divide them into tiering 1, tiering 2, and tiering 3 sites. So that's one of the important things that I'm going to see through data analytical tools like Spotfire and Tableau. And within that site, as an operations lead, I can use this data visualization tools for site management. Now within the site, we need to make sure that all sites are inspection ready all the time. Tomorrow FDA inspectors comes in, they will see erratic data, a lot of queries or protocol deviations or issues or GCP compliance violations. How are we going to manage them? By continuously using data visualization tools like Tableau, Spotfire. What we can see is like a dashboard. How are the sites performing? Are they in the red zone? Are they in the green zone? Are they in the yellow zone? And then I will ask my CRA, Clinical Research Associate, to pay an immediate visit to the sites to take care of those problems. That's the whole concept of risk-based monitoring. In order for me to use the risk-based monitoring, I have to rely on the data visualization tools to have a dashboard to see how my sites are performing. And why I need SAS. SAS programming. First, I need database programmers to program my CRFs, case report forms, right? We are talking about data, but how the data will be captured. Data will be captured through EDC system. And EDC system sponsor will either outsource or liaise with the in-house data management to program those case report forms, electronic case report forms within the EDC system. The most popular systems available in the market like Rave, Data Labs, or Oracle RDC. It doesn't matter what kind of EDC system we are using. Someone has to program and customize those case report forms according to my project, according to my studies. That's where SAS programming, database programmers comes into picture. Then queries. How are we going to generate queries? SQL language. Raising queries, resolving the queries, reconciliation of the data between clinical database and the safety database, entering the data that comes in the clinical database. If there is any adverse events, serious adverse events, that will be captured through safety database, Oracle, Oracle Safety Suite, Safety Gateway. But end of the day, we need to reconcile to make sure the data is consistent between the safety and the clinical database. And that's where my global medical safety folks comes into picture, who runs those safety databases. And then what else I'm going to use SAS programming or statistical programming for. Once we collect the data, how we're going to see the data output, right? Through tables, listings. That will be done by our statistical programmers. So in order for me to analyze the data sitting with the biostatisticians and my scientists as a clinician, I rely on those listings tables. And that's where I rely on clinical SAS analytical team to give me a snapshot of how many patients took this drug, out of them how many got the adverse events, how many have clinical response, how many have been progressed, how many early terminated, what was the grade of those adverse events. I can see a snapshot through those SAS analytical tools. And then, while writing the clinical study report, our clinical CSR, we need to submit the report to the FDA. At that time, again, I'm going to use my expertise from medical writers and also my programming team to give me those listings into my technical documents like protocol, investigator's brochure, and CSR, clinical study report. So see, as a business owner, how I am using different services within all, we call it as data management, but there's a clear demarcation of different departments within the data management working collaboratively and continuously to make things happen. So their job starts from the inception, that is from startup, goes to the study conduct, and all the way to the closeout, so that we can capture data, analyze the data, and report the data to the FDA in the United States and healthcare authorities in different countries. Now, just briefly, I just want to orient you towards the general process about clinical trials, right? So once the drug, here we are talking about the clinical trials, not preclinical, because whenever I say clinical trials involve human subjects. So we don't need to talk about preclinical animal testings in vitro because that's not applicable for a data science folks. But once the study goes into the clinical phase, technically we are talking about 4 different phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And this is a high-level snapshot of what happens during each phase. You don't need to go in detail now, but phase 1 is the first time we are conducting this study, so the prime importance for us is to make sure our drug is safe. And how data science comes into picture. We're going to capture the data. What kind of data? Safety data. And how? Based on, we program the adverse events. The number of adverse events. The less the number of adverse events, the more safer is your drug. That's to prove your hypothesis. Then, once we get permission from the FDA to report the data to go into the phase 2, much more comprehensive, where we're going to have more sites and more patients. Here we are trying to prove 2 important endpoints or parameters, safety and efficacy. And how are we going to prove the efficacy? Number of positive results. We use a word called as ORR, observable response rate, or overall response rate. So my drug is safe, my drug also works for the intended cause it's supposed to be. And how am I going to capture them? Through positive results. Is it a stable disease or partial response or complete response? Again, through data. Once we get permission, we ask permission from the FDA to go to a much more elaborative phase called as phase 3, where we have well-designed trials. We're going to have different study designs to avoid bias, like randomization, blinding. For that, again, we use the different systems. And here what you're trying to prove, you're trying to prove the commercial viability of the drug. FDA might say, okay, your drug is safe and efficacious, but there are more credible and even better drugs in the market. Why have to give permission to your particular drug? So that's where phase 3 comes into picture. Here you're trying to prove that your drug is not only safe, not only effective, but either the best in the market or at least equivalent to the industry standard. So that's where we are trying to compare them with industry standards or placebo. We're going to have extensive amount of the data here, and then finally we submit an application to the FDA asking permission to market the drug. And that application is called as NDA, which stands for New Drug Application. The turnaround time is anywhere between 2 to 2.5 years. They will review the data. If they have questions, they will come back. Meanwhile, they will inspect. They can inspect the site, which is hospital. They can inspect a pharma or a sponsor. They can inspect a contract research organization or a CRO. or they can inspect an IRB, or they can go to another country and inspect foreign sites. International inspections, especially if you're using foreign data to get market approval within the United States. FDA can give approval, and sometimes they do a conditional approval asking you to do phase 4 trials. Even if FDA doesn't have any conditional approval, the sponsor companies still do phase 4 trials for their own competitive edge. And what is phase 4? The drug might be effective now, drug might be safe now, but what happens in the long term? Probably it might have some dangerous implications, dangerous complications from long-term usage. So that's where data capturing, data analytical tools also comes into picture, to have patient registries set up, to have survey monkeys and different types of surveillance tools. Why? To capture data from different sources, physicians, patients, registries, social media, you name it. What kind of data are you looking at? Long-term safety data, long-term efficacious data, long-term clinical data. And that's why phase 4 trials are called as post-marketing surveillance studies or long-term safety or pharmacovigilance studies. So in all these phases, data science plays an important role, even in the clinical trials, post-clinical trials, in the marketing trials. And that's where this program has a great value proposition, because we're going to be teaching you different components within the data science. And if you see, there's a very busy slide, but end of the day, systems only holds good when systems talk with each other. Do you guys agree, right? Systems only work if someone has to enter the data inside. So to avoid redundancies, to optimize the processes, to cut short the time, systems has to work with each other. And that's where, when I said the future of clinical trials using technology and innovation, there's always some kind of drawbacks that compatibility of the systems is a huge challenge. A lot of artificial startup companies who are thriving now, trying to address those challenges to see how we can make the systems compatible so they can talk to each other for a better, seamless data integration. So in clinical trials, if you see how different stakeholders, different key players are working. So you have data from clinical subjects, you have from operations, you have safety data, you have laboratory data, you have examination data, you have data from the clinical registry, which is clinicaltrials.gov, and you have data from ePro, patient-reported outcome devices, and you have regulatory data, and then you have repositories. Everything goes into a repository, which we call SDTM, and then from that we're going to have an output. Output can be, here data science comes into picture, like how we're going to integrate the data, how we're going to aggregate the data, how we're going to standardize the data, and how we're going to seamlessly make sure the data is flowing through different systems. That's, we call it as integration as a service. And then we see the output, how it's going to go into clinicaltrials.gov, which is federal registry. How we're going to use it for tables and listings. How we're going to use it for regulatory reporting. How we're going to use it for safety reporting. How we're going to use it for reconciliation of safety and clinical database. How we're going to use for programming. So that's how the different systems will talk to each other to make sure the data is collected from the study startup, conduct, closeout, all the way to capturing the data, analyzing the data, recording the data, reporting the data to the health authorities. And that's also in alignment with global ICH good clinical practice principle standards or guidelines. At this point, I just want to give you, so your instructors momentarily, the professors will introduce themselves to you, and then they're going to go into the actual core topics of this program, different modules, and how those modules are going to benefit you based on your background. But I'm going to, end of the class, I'm also available to answer your questions, any questions you might have, to see like how people with different backgrounds can fit into this profile. Well, thank you very much. At this point, I am going to hand over it to my colleague, Professor Pawan. He will take you to the individual modules, but I'll be in the background. But end of the session, we're going to open up the floor for questions or any concerns you guys might have. Thank you very much, folks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Praveen. So I hope all of you can hear me, guys.
Yes, Professor Pawan, you're loud and clear. Thank you.
So, as my colleague Dr. Praveen was explaining, definitely in the near future, clinical trials are going to come to the patients. So when we talk about data mining and machine learning, today we are in an era where we are building data-driven decision-making systems, right? So whichever domain we talk about, be it healthcare, be it pharma, or be it finance, be it any industry, wherever there is data, definitely there are a lot of use cases related to data science and machine learning. In fact, knowing or not knowing, all of us are a part of or the beneficiaries of technologies like machine learning. Or today, if you see, machine learning and data science kind of technologies have become an integral part of our day-to-day living itself. I mean, you can see a lot of applications wherever you go. You are able to see in the last decade, last 10 or 15 years, technology has changed our life tremendously, right? So similarly, coming to pharma, coming to clinical research or healthcare or different domains, if we start talking about the use cases, if we start talking about the revolutions that are being made using the data science, they are really countless, right? So now, if we talk about what analytics or what data mining or machine learning is, right? There are basically two types of, looking at it. The first thing is you're basically trying to analyze the historical data to understand what's happening, right? So if you are talking about, let's say, a financial industry, looking at the data, looking at the historical data, you're actually trying to understand what's happening. If you talk about a retail industry, maybe just by looking at the analyzing the historical data, you're trying to gain an expertise a domain expert has in that particular field, right? So in this course of study, I'll be teaching data science using R as well as data science using Python. Okay, so these are two different technologies for that aspect. So when we talk about R, basically R is a statistical software majorly used for statistics, analytics, and machine learning. So it has the inbuilt libraries for statistics and machine learning. In fact, I have taught R to doctors, lawyers, CAs. What I mean by that is R can be taught to anybody, right? A layman, I mean, you need not to know programming language, or you need not to be coming really from a technology background to gain an expertise in R, right? R is basically developed in such a way that anybody can learn R and start with analyzing data. At the same time, I would also be teaching Python for that matter. So how Python is different from R? If you see, R is purely for the research purpose, where when we talk about Python, Python being the programming language, right? You can bring your machine learning into, you can convert your machine learning into a software. So when I say that, Python is majorly used for implementation purpose, right? So when we talk about, let's say in this course, we would not be just learning data science and machine learning, but we would also be learning neural networks, concepts of deep learning, right? One step ahead of machine learning. So that's where we would be looking at the importance of Python. So whenever you do a detailed research about a topic using the data, we talk about R. And whenever you want to automate that whole process of analyzing the data as, let's say, a software, then most of the times you'd be looking at Python. Okay. So these are the two technologies I would be teaching in this class. Will there be hands-on training for R and Python? Asking the question asked by Gurpreet. So Gurpreet, it would be a completely hands-on session where you would be learning at least, okay, I'll tell you how the class starts. So we will be starting with learning about R as a tool. We'll understand, different scenarios in terms of what are the different data structures present in R, what are the different functions, how to use a function on a data set in R. First we would learn. Then we'll get into statistics. We'll understand, what are the different kind of categories of statistics that exists, what are the probability techniques, and then we would be discussing how do you test an hypothesis, what are the different statistical tests that are available to do the hypothesis testing, we'll understand. So with that, we will, so whatever I said so far is completely hands-on, by the way. And with that, we'll move forward. We'll understand supervised techniques in R. Okay, we'll be using data sets to implement the algorithm to learn how to, first, when we say data analysis, we would be learning how to work with the historical data, that is diagnosis of your data for that matter. And then we would be learning how to do decision, how to take right decisions based on the historical data, that is machine learning, for example, right? So basically machine learning is all about learning from the historical data so that you can predict the future, right? Predict for the unforeseen data set. So these are the topics we would be learning in R. And when we get to Python, basically we would be again starting with learning what Python is as a programming language. We'll be learning a little bit of programming syntax there. And then we'll start with, again, some data analytics in Python. How do you do exploratory data analytics? How do you clean the data, etc. Then we'll get into machine learning in Python. We will be learning, a couple of regression technology algorithms like linear regression or polynomial linear regression or SVM, decision tree, random forest kind of regression algorithms. We'll put all of them together and compare as well. And then we would be learning how to work with qualitative data, that is categorical data for that matter. And we would be learning about different packages that offers these abilities in Python. SciPy offers you all the statistical related capabilities in Python. NumPy offers you n-dimensional arrays in Python. Basically, Pandas offers you data structure to deal with data sets itself. So we would be exploring a couple of classification algorithms here as well. When I say a couple of classification algorithms, we'll be looking at logistic regression, decision tree, random forest. These are different algorithms to learn from the data so that you can predict the future. So basically, when I talk about machine learning, there are majorly two types of machine learning, supervised and unsupervised. Supervised machine learning is all about learning from the historical data so that you can predict the future. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you see in the America, you have IBM Watson kind of systems which are capable of, let's say, detecting cancer cells based on image processing better than doctors, they say nowadays, right? So what do we mean by these algorithms? How can they actually do a cancer cell detection better than doctor? If you have a question, this will be, we'll be going into the minute details of how actually you build systems which can take decisions on their own, right? So in simple words, it's all about learning from the data. That's how we learn. That's how human beings learn as well, right? So how we learn from the books or uh, videos, etc. So we make an algorithm to understand a statistical relationship between two different variables to learn how they are related to each other, right? Let's say we want to identify what is a probability for a patient to, or how much risk a patient have to develop a cancer disease in the near future, or maybe let's say what is the risk of a patient to be diabetic in the near future. If you are trying to predict that, so basically you would have done a detailed analysis first, so that you would have understood the in and out of what is diabetes, actually what's happening with different patients. All that research you would have conducted. So once that is done, when we say machine learning, it's all about finding out a statistical relationship between the variable that is diabetes versus all the independent variables. That is, let's say you have already you have diagnosed 500 patients for diabetics. Maybe half of them are diabetic and half of them are not diabetic. So now machine learning is all about building a relationship between the result of your diagnosis, diabetic or not diabetic, versus all the other variables such as the blood sugar, cholesterol level, or blood pressure, etc. Right? So this is machine learning. So now in this program, we would not be only learning about data analysis and machine learning. We would be also looking at the neural networks. All right. So when we talk about neural networks, it's one step ahead of machine learning, right? So when I say one step ahead of machine learning, what I mean by that is um, basically here you are building algorithms which can learn on their own, or in other words, neural networks is a pure effort to copy the functionality of human brain, right? So that's why we are calling it as neural networks. We use or we build neurons. So in human brain, we have millions of neurons that are working, right? That are learning continuously. So similarly, there we would be building neurons which learns from the data, right? So we would be learning about all these aspects. And before we conclude, I would also like to show you life cycle of data science project. So you would be getting a data set which may have a problem definition as well. Whereas in our case, I said looking at data to find out the risk of for a patient to develop to be diabetic in the near future, for example, right? So first, you have this problem definition and you have collected a data set, right? So in the next step, you would be validating the data for various aspects. Yeah, some of the values could be missing in a data, or some of the values could be incomplete in your data. Maybe some of the values are not represented in a proper format, right? Some of the values you see, some of the, let's say you have a column weight, some of the, or let's say you have a column income, some of the records have the income in dollars, some of the records have income in euros. So you have to do something about it to correct this, right? So basically data validation is a phase where you would make sure that the data that you are looking at is a right representation of the business, be it a be it the data from pharma or healthcare, clinical research, whatever domain it belongs to, right? Once you make, once you ensure, that the data is the right representation of the business, we start doing something called exploratory data analysis. So when we say exploratory data analysis, it's all about looking at your data without any assumptions. So you can consider this as a basic set of data analysis to actually understand what's happening. So this is the phase where you would be doing historical data analysis. Then we move on to the fifth stage, that is the advanced analytics, which is all about maybe you have already learned from the data here, so that here you are predicting the future. So advanced analytics, when I mention, it could be machine learning, it could be neural networks, etc. So to get into advanced analytics, we have a set of data preparation techniques to make sure the data is in the right format, right form, so that you can apply different algorithms. So finally, what you have is various insights that can help you draw a conclusion, right? So based on this conclusion, you would be finally doing the solution development. So this is the whole life cycle of a data science project, for example. So to put it in one word, in this course, we would be learning all the essential skills that are required for one to work with data. So we start with R. We will learn the data analytics. We would be learning statistics. Then we would be learning machine learning using R. And then we would be looking at Python. We would be understanding the various, Python being a programming language, data analytics or machine learning is not native to Python. So somebody has developed this NumPy package so that you can work with matrix and arrays. Somebody has developed SciPy package so that all the statistical related equations are given in that package. Somebody has invented pandas so that you can work with data sets, do all the analytics there. Somebody has invented sklearn, that's another scikit-learn, that's another module or package where all the machine learning algorithm resides. Then we would be looking at Google's TensorFlow platform for neural networks, TensorFlow as well as Keras, which works on top of Python for neural networks. Okay, so these are the objectives as long as module 3 and 4 are concerned. However, I'll stay back. Right now I'll be handing it over to Professor Aslam Khan, and however I'll stay back in the class so that at the end we can have a question and answer session as well. All right, here we go.
Can someone please confirm you can hear me?
Yes, Professor Aslam, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. I was just checking because I'm having some issues with my phone. All right, so let's begin. Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Aslam Khan. And before we begin, I would like to probably ask you all a question before I introduce myself and get into the details about this. I know you guys have been sitting through this for the past 1 hour, I believe. So the question I have for all of you is, what was the most common word that was used in this entire one hour of session? the word that has been often repeated? What do you all think? If you all, I see there are 10 people on the call.
Data.
Data, okay. That is, in fact, the right answer. The one word that has been often repeated in this 1 hour session, as you all know, is the word data. All right, so let's talk about then how your life will relate to data in this session, in this course that you will be eventually be taking, hopefully. But before I do that, let me first introduce myself. As you see here, my name is Aslam Khan. I currently work at Sanofi Pharmaceuticals as a PM, and I have experience in the life science industry for the past 12, 13 years. I work in the clinical data management, biostatistics, clinical programming, SAS programming areas, and I'm currently in Sanofi's information technologies area where I lead multiple projects related to solutions implementations pertaining to medical function. And I think that should be enough about myself. I do have a master's degree from University of Texas in MIS, and also I'm a certified SAS base and advanced programming. Okay, so as you answered the question rightly, the most common word that we heard today was data. It was repeated so often that our whole discussion was revolving around data. And the reason why I mentioned that is because this course pertains to talking about data and the tools that will impact and will help you work with data. And as has been explained by the previous colleagues of mine, how important is data these days. In fact, the whole course is about data science, so you cannot really miss out the word data there. And the whole point here is that you will be learning those skill sets that are out there in so much demand that by having the skill sets, you will be able to get into those kind of job roles that will help you get placed very fast and very soon. In fact, as a matter of fact, it is said that by one of the research that 88% of data currently out there is ignored or not looked into. May I ask the people there, please, if you could mute your phone, if there's some background noise. So I was mentioning that there's a lot of data out there, almost 88% of it, which is ignored or unused by all these companies out there. And the reason is not because they don't want to use all the data. The whole purpose is that they wish to somehow use that data. But the problem is that there are not enough good applications or tools to be able to dig into those kind of huge amounts of big data that's out there. And simply there's not enough skill sets in people to be able to use those tools. As has been talked about, the tools that we are talking about are primarily Python, R, and SAS, of course, which is my area of discussion. So the whole point here is that you will be, by taking these courses, you'll be learning and gathering these skill sets in your array of skills that you wish to acquire. And one of the most important skill set that you will learn is SAS programming, which is where I begin here, because I will be the instructor for SAS programming. And I will be, as part of this coursework, teaching you from the basics, foundations of what SAS programming is, as applied in the context of clinical sciences, or life sciences, I should say, and the pharmaceutical setting. So what we'll be doing is we'll be going into the basics of SAS, and here I'm sure we may have questions as to will my background need to be in IT or something to do with programming to be able to understand SAS. So up front, I can tell you that really there is not a necessary or prerequisite to have any IT background or programming background to really learn SAS, because SAS programming is a pretty easy language to learn, and I have had students and friends who have learned SAS who had no prior background with programming. So up front, I guess I should probably encourage you to remove that doubt from your minds as to whether it will be difficult for you to gain this skill set or not. So with that said, what we'll be doing in this course is we'll be starting off with the base SAS, which is really the foundational elements and the elementary aspects of SAS programming. And we'll be then going into the other part, which is advanced SAS, which will help you learn some more insight into how it is used in the clinical trial setting, in the pharmaceutical setting, and some more advanced procedures and methods that will be applied in SAS. And as you see in the triangle, the last part being the clinical SAS part as well. In fact, in my view, the clinical SAS is not distinct from the other parts, because our whole context of in this programming is that we will be using real-life examples from the clinical SAS, clinical setting, and we will use data that is pertaining to the life science industry. So you will learn all those concepts, and in a way you'll get comfortable with the jargon that is used in the pharmaceutical setting. So in a way you'll not only be learning SAS programming and the foundational aspects of SAS and the advanced aspects of SAS, but also the jargon that is used out there in the industry in the clinical trial setting. So as you see